لطفاً بگو که خودتو معرفی کن، بگو برای چی تو کانونشن بودی.
So my name is FARSHAD. FARSHAD Azadiana. I'm a student right now at York University at the Osgood, and I've been a long-time NDP activist. I joined the party when I was 16, and today's interview we're going to be talking about the federal NDP convention, and it's a very important convention. The NDP's rise in popularity, rise in the polls, obviously, very significant from the standpoint of, very possibly entering government. And I've been the co-chair of the Toronto Youth NDP for the last 2 years. I've been a campaign manager for some campaigns, so obviously it was important for us to go to the convention, to have our voices heard, and to partake in the relevant political debates and discussions that are affecting the workers' movement, the youth movement, the native movement, all these issues which have a significant influence on and relationship to the NDP.
So you are disappointed that the resolution of the convention in Montreal?
Certainly, one of the big issues for us going to the NDP convention was precisely the proposed amendment to the Constitution, which aimed to change the language, the principles of the party. And one of the big shifts was to remove a lot of the political content relating to socialism. That the word socialism, democratic socialist, still exists in the party roots, but there was a change to eliminating wording on abolishing of poverty, on nationalization and public ownership, and the new language includes words like managing the market. So symbolically, it's certainly a shift towards the right, towards the Liberal Party's politics. A shift. We shouldn't exaggerate it either, but we should also remember it's a symbolic one. And so for us, it was disappointing that we lost that vote. Of course, in a political party, especially of the magnitude of the NDP, sometimes you're in a minority. I'm still very loyal to the NDP, but for me, what's the biggest issue here is that today we're living in a moment when capitalism is in crisis around the world. Today is the day where austerity is affecting all working people. Public sector, private sector, young people, pensioners, indigenous people. The cuts are affecting all of society. Capitalism is proving its inability to provide even a semi-civilized life in even the Western world. And so now is not the time to shift towards the right. Now is the time to shift towards a very vocal opposition to austerity and the system that creates it.
So do you think that there are any new parties, any left or social party to be established or to split within the NDP, any rift between the NDP?
I don't think there's a perspective or there can be really an expectation for a new party to develop at this point, and nor do I think it's a good idea for it to develop at this point. But there's certainly a rift. There's certainly a political debate within the New Democratic Party. You got to remember, the New Democratic Party is a workers' party. It was built by the sweat and the blood of workers, of farmers, of socialists who fought to build a voice for working people against the big parties of the Bay Street. But at the same time, as the party comes closer to power, there develops this kind of mentality that we have to be responsible. There develops one can say even some career mentality among some elements. That this rift between the right and the left wing of the party is a reality, and it's partially a factor of the NDP's coming close to power. For us, there needs to be an absolute struggle to make sure that NDP remains the voice of working class people, that it's the voice in Parliament of the movement on the streets, of the workers, of the students in Quebec, of the indigenous people, of the Occupy movement. And so what I encourage people to do, for example, in the universities, is join the NDP, fight to build the Workers' Party, but also make sure the Workers' Party stands true to its purpose. Working people should see the NDP as their party.
Yeah, but since 2008, almost 1,200,000 people are out of job. It is a force for any socialist or any left party, but the NDP couldn't, or they didn't want to organize them. So how can they organize the worker, the unemployment, the poverty, and those kind of issues, and then address those issues?
Well, the NDP certainly can. It's a question of does it want to, does the leadership want to take that initiative? Let's remember, in the NDP membership, you'll find leaders of trade unions, you'll find student leaders, you'll find leaders of the I Don't Know More movement. So it's not like the NDP cannot be this force to mobilize, but at the current moment we should be disappointed. The NDP hasn't played the role it should. To be honest, one thing that I think is the most striking mistake and betrayal we can say is that the NDP was silent during the movement of the Quebec youth. But most of the Quebec youth would already. So Saeed, you're completely correct in saying that the NDP hasn't been playing the role it needs to be playing in terms of leading these movements of the workers. But at the same time, the NDP has enormous potential as a political organization, the only significant political organization of working class people in English Canada.
Yeah, so when we see the NDP, the Ontario NDP, Andrea Horwath, we don't see that much of the voice of the labor or medium class of Ontarian. While there is recession, while there is so many unemployment, the tuition fee, so, and you think that they want just, and always they will be in opposition, but not that much strength. How can they be ineffective, or how can they get the power when they cannot absorb the potential forces?
You know, Saeed, as a Marxist, as an activist with the Fight Back magazine, and our website is marxist.ca for the interest of the viewers. As a longtime member of the NDP, you have to remember that we should not see the NDP as something that is static, that's unchanging. The NDP belongs to the workers, and it's completely realistic, the idea that working people can take back their organizations. You see, sometimes workers will be frustrated with their union at work, but that doesn't mean you go and build a new union from scratch. That can often be a complete waste of energy. That if the workers can change the society, they can definitely change their own organizations. And as the Marxists of the NDP, our aim is to actually organize that struggle to make sure the workers' organizations actually stand for our interest. I apologize. You know, it's a little bit stressful with the exam time. We got a little bit sick.
So the last question is that we are north of United States. I told to Dr. Amir Khadir too. The American, they don't let any social government on the power. You know that.
Well, they will try to.
They don't.
They will try to harm such a government, certainly.
No, they don't, because when they intervene in Venezuela, so they don't let anybody on their north, on neighbor, to be like that. So is that one reason they change it, to drop socialism from the policy to get to the power, while we lose so many of your member in the future, because then they will absorb with liberal, with Justin Trudeau?
You know, let's be honest, like, to some degree there's some speculation here. We don't know that the NDP really wants to merge with the Liberals. It's not, even Mulcair has been opposed to it. I have many disagreements with Mulcair.
Not about the merger, about the, see, some people are coming to NDP because the base, the roots. So when they want, they change it, they change the side too. They go to some party that is can defend their rights.
Oh yeah, and certainly there'll be this debate going on. But on your question about the threat of American imperialism, you know, you mentioned Venezuela. Venezuela is a positive example where for almost 14 years, the Venezuelan people have been showing that despite the opposition of the Venezuelan imperialists, the ruling class and the Venezuelan elite, they've been able to defend their movement. So, you know, we should not over-exaggerate the strength of American imperialism. Working people, if they're organized, they know what their interests are, can fully resist that. But certainly, you know, one can say, when we say there's a pressure on the NDP to move towards the right, this pressure that has a lot of effect on some of the leaders in the party, part of that is a consideration of the threat from big business, that Bay Street and Wall Street will try to punish a left-wing government. We even saw this with Bob Rae in the 1990s in this province, where there was, you know, they demonized the socialist Ontario, and Bob Rae buckled to that pressure and moved to the right because he was so afraid of the threats to the Ontario economy coming from the American big business and the Canadian big business. So that's a big factor. That's certainly a factor that's affecting the thinking of many people in the NDP. But at the same time, let's remember, in America, there's another positive influence coming. Look at the movement in Wisconsin, or the Chicago teachers, or the Occupy movement. These movements had a huge resonating effect in Canada. So at the same time as there's a negative influence of the American elite, a very positive example comes from American working people. And that's something that I think the rank and file of the NDP, that workers, youth, take immense inspiration from. And the proof was just a couple of minutes from where we're standing here. There was the Occupy movement in Toronto, directly was inspired by a movement starting in New York. So there's that also, that we have many friends south of the border as well, I would say.
So the question is, what is your advice, or what is your suggestion to the Iranian new generation? Because as I see, so many of them are not in favor of any political activities. They want just to be neutral here, as long as I have seen. Maybe I am wrong. Please correct me if I am wrong.
No, and I'll say one thing is that there's many young Iranians. I've been very active in the student movement, the youth movement, in the NDP, and people often make a joke that English, French, and Iranian is the third language. That sometimes in the meetings people start speaking Farsi, and a lot of the other members are like, "Yo, we don't understand." So it's a bit of a joke within the left, the significant role that Iranians are playing, something I'm proud of. But I'll say this, that for Iranian young people, one thing is the issues in Canada affect our lives. Our parents are struggling to make ends meet. We are struggling with our student debt. We're struggling to find a job and a life in the society. And immigrants face even more obstacles than the average Canadian worker because of our ethnicity, because of language barriers, a whole series of factors. But on top of that, look, the issues back home that we face. Look at the sanctions, the threat of war. These things affect us. And so we cannot think of Canadian or Western politics as irrelevant to our lives. They're totally relevant. And Iranian youth should certainly get involved, both for the issues back home, both for the issues in this country. And I would say Iranian youth should get involved in the student movement, in the workers movement, in the NDP, not just as passive supporters, just to cheer, but to get active and assert their own interest in these organizations. One of the big things that Toronto Youth NDP did was made a clear stance against war with Iran, against sanctions with Iran, while at the same time supporting the progressive movement of the workers, of trade unions, of the youth in Iran at the same time. But we brought this into the agenda, into the NDP, that there was a very significant anti-war sentiment among the NDP members, but some NDP members were like, well, maybe sanctions are a good idea. But through our influence, through our taking a voice in Canada's labour movement, we were able to convince many people that sanctions were totally incorrect. So I just bring this up as one example of how, the issues that affect us as Iranians are issues that are relevant to the Canadian political environment, and we should be involved both thinking about back home and thinking about the society we live in today to fight for a better future for ourselves and our families.
Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much for the
Thanks a lot.
Merci.
خیلی ممنون.